While many Americans have taken to the streets in recent weeks to exercise their freedoms of speech and assembly, a reminder of how democracy is under attack overseas. Mainland China has proposed a sweeping new security law over Hong Kong decades before it agreed it could officially take control of the territory. And just today, the U.S. Senate passed a bill that would strengthen the U.S.'s ability to sanction China in response to the law. So what's next for the people of Hong Kong? Our Ian Pannell reports.
The morning rush hour in Hong Kong. You could be forgiven for thinking life has returned to normal here.
I'm out here distributing flyers for my friend.
But for activists like Joey Hsu, everything is far from business as usual.
We believe that sanctioning from the US and also the other countries could be a very useful way in deterring the suppression from China.
Because while the world was looking the other way, dealing with the pandemic, China moved to strangle the pro-democracy movement. Soon, a new national security law will be imposed in Beijing, overriding local lawmakers and, for activists, turning the one country, two systems policy Hong Kong's built on into one country, one system, China's.
The national security law is going to be implemented in Hong Kong very soon, and we are willing to educate the Hong Kongers about the details of the law and why are we considering that a very dangerous law.
It was June of last year when millions came out in defiance of the controversial extradition bill, the largest protest ever in Hong Kong. We were there on the ground, watching events escalate month after month, until they exploded in violent confrontation between protesters and police around college campuses. The world watched as Hong Kong was engulfed by anger, fearful Beijing would respond with force. But few saw what was really coming. As mainland China and Hong Kong warded off the worst of the current wave of infections and the rest of the world grappled with the pandemic, Beijing made a shock announcement. It decided not to act with direct violence, but a much more ominous threat. A new criminal law for Hong Kong, written unilaterally by Beijing and enacted by decree. The extradition bill last year was scrapped under pressure, but there's no stopping this new law, which could come into effect as early as next week. We still don't have all the details, but what we do know is that it would criminalise and punish acts of secession, subversion and terrorism, in addition to acts of collusion with foreign forces that interfere in Hong Kong, with up to 10 years in prison. Many in Hong Kong believe this law would close down free speech, end the right to protest or even speak out, in short, whatever China deems to be subversive. International condemnation was swift, especially from the Trump administration.
The Chinese government's move against Hong Kong is the latest in a series of measures that are diminishing the city's long-standing and very proud status. This is a tragedy for the people of Hong Kong, the people of China, and indeed the people of the world.
Pro-Beijing politicians say that China had no option after Hong Kong failed to pass its own version of the laws in the years since it returned to China.
They were compelled to do so.
Beijing watched with growing horror as parts of Hong Kong became a battleground, seeing the escalating violence as a direct challenge to its rule and national security threat.
People not only people smashing windows, but laying siege of the Legislative Council, throwing petrol bombs at courts and police headquarters, waving Hong Kong independence flags and singing revolutionary songs, which would amount to subversive or secessionist activity in many countries, and we have no laws to deal with it. So Beijing came to the conclusion that they have to step into the breach.
Jiang Fan is a writer with The New Yorker.
I think what you see with the legislation, with the security law, is Beijing saying, to the Hong Kong parliament, you've made a mess of things, and we can't let this drag out for any longer.
I mean, some would say this was inevitable. You can't have one country, two systems when the one country is a single-party, communist, authoritarian state, and that the protesters overplayed their hand.
Yeah, I think that you will always hear that argument coming from essentially, especially from pro-Beijingers. But increasingly, I wonder if Beijing ever had another scenario in mind for Hong Kong. What's, I think, particularly unnerving here is that this latest security legislation will allow Beijing to directly control the kind of protests that Hong Kong has, that we've seen in Hong Kong time and again.
And for activists like Joey Hsu, this law makes her likely a target.
And we are now calling for the U.S. Congress to execute the sanctions listed in the Act, because we feel like that would be an effective way to deter the suppression from the Chinese Communist Party and also the Hong Kong government officials.
Joey's role has led her to lobby foreign governments for assistance. Under the new Act, Joey being in these very meetings could likely be a crime.
I'm very afraid because as listed in the national security law, they are especially targeting those who had been going on for lobbying trips or going on or participating in international advocacies, and they are framing this as being associated with foreign factors. We did not expect the national security law to be coming so quickly. I'm prepared to be arrested, but then to talk about imprisonment, I'm not sure whether I am well prepared for that or not.
At the height of the demonstrations last year, we spoke with a frontline protester who asked to be called Mizu. He was one of those more willing to directly confront authorities. In a mark of the climate of fear here, his face is covered to protect his identity.
I think really independence is the only way. I don't think, for me, I don't think the government will satisfy the 5 demands.
The national security law has brought the protest back onto the streets, but for now, with markedly fewer numbers and a much heavier police presence. Mizu has decided to wait in the wings for the time being.
I think many people have prepared that this kind of days will come, but very few of them had once thought that it will come so early. I think it will just make things more underground. Honestly, I think the national security law mainly affects the people who is, I would say, more peaceful because they are trying to show their stance.
So long as the law can give sufficient deterrent effect, that could help to restore order and stability in Hong Kong. One country, two systems is a political compromise. In a way, it is a contract between the central authorities and us to maintain our special status in our nation. It is in our interest to be able to protect the country. Otherwise, the rest of the nation won't be willing to give us our separate treatment.
So we now have these two diametrically opposed visions, narratives of what the national security legislation will mean for Hong Kong. On the one hand, Hong Kong becomes just another Chinese city, and you have Beijing's narrative that it has to assert control, but that one country, two systems lives on.
Clearly, Beijing very shrewdly wants to keep up the perception that it is a humane ruler and that it will keep to its promise. What Hong Kong protesters told me and again was they wanted a sense of being able to determine their own fate. They wanted the rule of law to be protected.
But for now, there is still hope. But battles surely coming for the future of Hong Kong.
I don't feel like this will completely kill our movement. And I believe that Hong Kongers are creative and smart enough to make an underground, or I believe that would be one of the ways to sustain our movement. We'll be fighting until our last breath before the implementation of the national security law.
Ian Pannell, ABC News, London.
Fighting until their last breath. Our thanks to Ian for that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.